Have you ever wondered if something so familiar, so private, could be quietly changing your body without you even noticing? A 74-year-old man once sat across from me, not sick, not in pain, but deeply unsettled. With a quiet voice, he said, "I didn't know I was hurting myself." For years, he had followed a routine many men do, never suspecting it might be affecting more than just his nights. I'm Dr. Mark, a urologist who has spent over 30 years listening to stories just like his. Stories of strength, of confusion, of men searching for answers no one ever taught them to ask. Because after 60, your body changes, and the way you care for it, even in private, matters more than ever. In this video, I'll share 5 powerful truths about masturbation that older men often learn too late. Not to alarm you, but to help you reclaim control, protect your health, and reconnect with the parts of yourself that still long to be seen. If this feels like a conversation you've been waiting for, stay with me. What you'll hear today might just change the way you think about aging, pleasure, and strength. Secret 1. Your erection isn't the whole story anymore. I'll never forget the look in Mr. Harold's eyes. He was 72, sharp-witted, dignified, but quietly troubled. He sat down in my office, let out a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of decades, and said, "Doc, I just don't feel like myself anymore. Things don't work the way they used to. Does that mean I'm not a real man now?" His voice cracked at the end, and for a moment he looked smaller than his years. That question? It wasn't just Harold's. It belongs to so many men who have sat in that same chair, braving the silence to ask what no one ever taught them to understand. What I told him then is what I wish every man over 60 could hear long before the worry sets in. Your erection is no longer the full story. And more importantly, that doesn't mean you've lost your manhood. It simply means the story has changed. The truth is, our bodies shift with time. Blood flow slows, nerves respond more thoughtfully, hormones follow different rhythms. What once happened quickly and effortlessly now requires more care, more presence. But this isn't something broken, it's something unfolding. When you stop trying to be the man you were at 25 and start listening to the man you are now, you begin to understand that pleasure, intimacy, and connection were never meant to be measured by firmness alone. We live in a world that often ties masculinity to performance. Hardness equals value, stamina equals strength. But real intimacy was never about pressure or proving something. It was about presence. And presence is something you have more of now than ever before. I've seen far too many men carry silent shame, thinking their changing bodies meant the end of their sexuality. I've watched them withdraw, avoid affection, even question their worth. But I've also seen something else. I've seen what happens when a man lets go of that old rule book and starts to rediscover his body on its own terms. He begins to learn that orgasm and erection are not the same, that emotional release, physical satisfaction, and meaningful connection are not out of reach. They've just moved to a different rhythm. Some of the most transformative conversations I've had with older men come after they realize they can still feel deeply, still give and receive pleasure, even if their bodies respond differently. In fact, many say that intimacy becomes richer with age, once they stop chasing performance and start exploring sensation. Slower doesn't mean weaker, softer doesn't mean less. It means more room for tenderness, more attention to touch, more listening to what actually feels good instead of what used to be expected. The old script said you had to be hard to be a man, but the new chapter, it says being a man is about honoring yourself, adapting with grace, and staying curious about your evolving body. It's not failure, it's wisdom in motion. What matters now is not whether your body behaves like it once did, but whether you can meet it with patience and respect. That shift alone has brought many of my patients to tears, not because something was lost, but because they finally felt free to stop fighting themselves. This is why I say this first secret is perhaps the most important. It opens the door to a whole new kind of intimacy, one where the pressure lifts and presence takes its place, where the question is no longer, am I still a man? But how can I show up more fully, more gently, and more completely for myself and for the ones I love. The truth is, you are still whole, still deserving, still deeply capable of pleasure. You haven't lost anything, you've simply changed. And in that change is the chance to become more attuned, more thoughtful, more alive in your own skin. So if you're still here, still listening, still open to this journey, type the number 1 in the comments. Let me know this message reached you. Let me know that you're still choosing to grow, to learn, and to stay connected to your body, even when it surprises you. Because this is just the beginning. And in the next secret, we're going to explore something even deeper. What if I told you that masturbation is not just about physical release, but about memory, emotion, and the quiet way we stay in touch with who we are? Stay with me. What comes next might change the way you see yourself forever. Secret 2, it's more than just physical. I once met a man named Gerald, a 78-year-old retired Navy veteran who had weathered more than his fair share of storms. He came into my office not with a medical emergency, but with something harder to name. He looked at me, quiet for a long moment, then finally said, "I just don't feel anything anymore. Not desire, not joy, just a sort of emptiness." It wasn't physical pain that brought him in. It was the slow, silent fading of something he didn't know how to hold on to. At first, he thought maybe something was wrong with his body, but as we talked, it became clear this wasn't about dysfunction. It was about disconnection. Gerald told me he had been masturbating almost every night, not because he was overwhelmed with desire, but because it helped him fall asleep. Because it gave him something to do when the house was quiet and the loneliness crept in. It was no longer about excitement or even comfort. It had become routine, automatic. A way to feel something when everything else felt distant. That conversation opened my eyes, and his too. You see, this is the second secret I wish more older men understood. Masturbation after 60 is not just about the physical release. It is deeply tied to your emotional world, your neurological patterns, and your unspoken needs. Your body is not just seeking pleasure, it is reaching for calm, for grounding, for a moment where you can feel safe inside yourself. Each time you experience release, your body produces a cascade of powerful neurochemicals. Dopamine for motivation, serotonin for mood balance, oxytocin for connection. These are not trivial side effects. They are vital to your emotional health, especially in later years when life slows down, when loved ones pass or move away, and when silence becomes a more familiar companion than conversation. Your body still hungers for these signals of life and connection. For many men, especially those living alone, masturbation can become a private ritual of coping. It soothes anxiety, helps with sleep, provides a sense of agency in a world that may feel increasingly out of their control. But here's the catch. When done without intention, without awareness, it can quietly lose its meaning. The habit remains, but the feeling fades, and eventually it no longer nourishes you, it simply fills a gap. That was Gerald's story. He wasn't ashamed of what he was doing, but he had never considered why he was doing it. No one had ever told him that masturbation could carry emotional weight, that it could be a quiet form of self-care, or that it could also become a way of numbing if left unchecked. We were raised in a world that didn't leave much room for men to feel. We were taught to be strong, to push through, to stay quiet. And when life starts to press in, when sleep is restless or loneliness grows heavier, we often reach for the only place we've ever truly allowed ourselves to let go. Not to seek pleasure, but to seek relief. Not to feel joy, but simply to feel something at all. But here's the beauty of this truth. When approached with presence, masturbation becomes more than a release. It becomes a mirror, a way to reconnect with your emotions, to check in with yourself, to feel into your body with kindness instead of judgment. When you slow down, breathe, and allow yourself to truly be in the moment, that simple act becomes healing. It becomes an anchor in the waves. So the danger is not in the act, it's in the disconnection. When you do it mindlessly, you may slowly train your body and brain to shut down deeper levels of sensation and intimacy. But when you bring intention into it, when you acknowledge that this is your body asking for gentleness, for comfort, for presence, it becomes a form of emotional clarity, a practice of self-awareness, a neurological balm for a nervous system that still longs to be held. And yes, even in your 70s or 80s, that still matters. More than ever, in fact. Because at this stage of life, the way you connect with yourself determines how deeply you can connect with the world around you. So if this truth surprised you, you're not alone. It surprises many. But the next secret may be even more urgent. Because what if I told you that ignoring this part of yourself entirely, letting it fall silent, could quietly be harming your health in ways no one ever warned you about? If you're still here, still listening, and still with me, type the number 2 in the comments. Let me know that this conversation matters to you, that you're ready to understand your body not just as a machine, but as a reflection of your emotional and spiritual life. Because you deserve more than silence. You deserve to feel fully, live deeply, and reconnect with every part of who you are. Stay with me. The next secret could change how you view this chapter of your life entirely. Secret 3, use it or lose it is real. I still remember the day Raymond walked into my office. He was 74, recently widowed, and had just begun dating again after spending over a decade alone. But instead of sitting with the joyful excitement of new possibility, he was burdened with shame. He looked down, his voice barely above a whisper, and said, "I finally found someone, Doc. Someone kind. Someone I feel something for. But my body, it doesn't work anymore. Not the way it used to." You could hear the heartbreak in his words. He didn't feel broken because of age. He felt broken because he thought he had missed his chance. But here's what Raymond, like so many other men in their 60s, 70s, and beyond, was never told. What he was experiencing wasn't failure. It wasn't the end. It was simply disuse. You see, sexual function isn't something that just vanishes because the calendar moves forward. It doesn't suddenly disappear when you turn 70 or when you've been alone for too long. It fades slowly, often quietly, not because the desire is gone, but because the body hasn't been invited to respond for a while. Just like muscles grow weaker without movement, the blood vessels, tissues, and nerve endings in the penis begin to lose sensitivity and function when they are ignored. The elasticity begins to fade. Circulation slows, nerve signals get quieter. And most heartbreaking of all, this happens silently. No one gives you a warning. No one teaches you that neglecting this part of yourself has a cost. Raymond hadn't touched himself in years. Not out of shame, not even because he didn't care, but because he thought it no longer mattered. Life had dulled his appetite, and he assumed that meant this chapter was over. But the body is far more forgiving than we give it credit for. I told Raymond gently that his experience wasn't permanent, that with time, patience, and gentle, consistent stimulation, his body could begin to remember. No pressure, no expectation. Just the quiet reintroduction of touch. And something remarkable happened. It didn't happen overnight, but it did happen. Sensation returned, confidence stirred. His body, like a garden untended for years, slowly came back to life under his own care. And in that revival, so did his sense of self-worth. There's a belief that many older men carry deep inside, though few say it aloud, that unless there is a partner involved, sexuality no longer serves a purpose. That pleasure should be shelved like an old photo album, a memory to look back on rather than something to experience in the now. That belief is not only limiting, it's harmful. Because whether or not you have someone lying beside you, your body is still yours. Your needs still matter, and your biology still responds when treated with attention, warmth, and respect. Masturbation at this stage of life isn't just about desire. It's about vitality, about maintenance, about staying in conversation with your body. It keeps your tissues supple, your blood flowing, and your nervous system responsive. But more than that, it's a quiet declaration that you still matter, that this part of your being is still alive, still worthy of your time, still capable of offering not only sensation, but comfort and joy. The phrase "use it or lose it" has often been said with a tone of warning. But I believe it should be said with gentleness and hope, because you haven't lost it. You just may need to invite it back. And when you do, you'll be surprised at how much of you is still there, waiting patiently to be remembered. If you've been wondering why things feel different, or if you've quietly accepted that this part of your life is over, I want you to know it doesn't have to be. With small steps, without shame, you can reconnect. Not for performance, not for anyone's approval, but for your own aliveness. And yet, there is something else we need to talk about. Because if disuse can cause quiet harm, so can certain forms of overuse. If the way you're staying sexually active is hurried, disconnected, or entirely digital, it might be reshaping your brain in ways you didn't expect. In the next secret, we'll talk about a hidden habit that many older men have adopted without realizing it. A habit that may be quietly dulling your sensitivity, lowering your drive, and changing how you relate to real intimacy. You'll want to hear this. And if you're still here with me, listening and feeling something stir within you, type the number 1 in the comments. Let me know this conversation matters. Let me know you're still reaching, still open, still willing to care for yourself in all the ways that count. Now let's continue to secret number 4. Secret 4, how porn quietly numbs you. It was nearly 9 o'clock in the evening when I had a quiet, heart-to-heart conversation with a man named Martin. He was 68, a retired teacher, and a widower who had spent the last few years living alone. As we spoke, his voice softened, almost as if he was unsure whether he had the right to say what was weighing on him. I still touch myself, Doc, but it's strange. I don't feel anything real anymore. Like I'm going through the motions, but I'm not really there. At first, Martin thought maybe it was just another symptom of getting older, that maybe age had taken away something precious without warning. But the more we explored his habits, the more something else came into focus. For years, Martin had relied on pornography as part of his nightly routine, not in excess, not obsessively, but quietly, consistently, a way to feel less alone, a way to bring back some kind of spark. But what he didn't realize, and what so many men his age are never told, is that this routine had gradually been rewiring his brain. This is the 4th secret, one I wish every man over 60 knew earlier. Because the truth is, pornography, especially when used often, can slowly rob you of your ability to feel. Not just physically, but emotionally too. As the brain ages, it becomes less adaptable. It clings more tightly to the patterns it repeats. Porn, with its constant novelty, fast pace, and exaggerated imagery, triggers a massive rush of dopamine, the brain's reward chemical. In younger brains, that flood might be manageable, but in older ones, that kind of stimulation comes at a price. Over time, your brain starts to expect that same level of intensity in order to respond. And anything slower, gentler, or more natural begins to feel flat. What used to bring comfort or closeness now feels muted. The warmth of a real touch, the slow rhythm of imagination, even the presence of your own hand can feel distant. You may still want intimacy, still desire connection, but your body doesn't respond. Not because it can't, but because it has become conditioned to chase something artificial. And tragically, most men never realize what's happening until the numbness has already crept in. Martin described it to me perfectly. He said, "It's like I'm in a brightly lit room with no windows. I can see everything, but I can't feel the breeze. I can't sense the world anymore." That kind of disconnection is more common than people think. It doesn't come from addiction alone. It comes from repetition without reflection, from choosing what's easy when what we really need is something slower and more human. But here's the good news. Healing is possible. I worked with Martin to gently step away from his reliance on screens, not through judgment or guilt, but through presence. We focused on breathing, on touch, on learning to be in the body again without rushing. And within a few weeks, something incredible happened. His sensation began to return. His imagination came back to life. Even his dreams became more vivid. All because he stepped away from the overstimulation and returned to something more real. He was shocked. And honestly, so was I. Not because I didn't believe it was possible, but because he had carried the weight of that disconnection for so many years. Years he could have spent feeling more, living more, loving more. All it took was a new approach, a new level of awareness. So if you've been feeling numb, if you've noticed that nothing quite stirs you like it used to, I want you to pause and ask yourself, what are you feeding your mind? What have you trained your body to expect? Because if you've been relying on artificial stimulation, even casually, it might be time to make a change. Not to take something away from your life, but to give something back. Your sensitivity, your presence, your ability to connect. If this message speaks to you, take a moment and type "feel" again in the comments. Let me know you're still here. Let me know that somewhere inside you still want more than just images. You want connection, and you deserve it. Now in the final secret, we'll bring everything together. Because after all the confusion, the silence, and the hidden shame so many men carry, there is one final truth that could change the way you see yourself and your health forever. Stay with me. The most important part is still to come. Secret 5. This is self-care, not shame. I remember clearly the moment Thomas, a gentle and well-mannered 75-year-old man, leaned in slightly at the end of a routine checkup and asked me in a quiet voice, "Doctor, is it still okay for someone like me to touch myself?" His tone wasn't casual. It carried the weight of uncertainty, almost like he was confessing a secret he wasn't sure he had the right to say out loud. That question didn't surprise me. What struck me was how many times I had heard it before, always wrapped in the same layers of hesitation, embarrassment, and silent shame. And this is what I want to say, not just to Thomas, but to every older man who has ever silently wondered the same thing. Masturbation is not something to hide from. Especially at this age, it may be one of the most important and meaningful forms of self-care you still have. The truth is, it's not a sign of weakness or loneliness. When done with care and presence, it becomes an act of health, a gesture of emotional balance, and a way of saying to yourself, "I am still alive." Biologically, this act supports your body in quiet but essential ways. It improves blood flow to the pelvic region, keeping those tissues from becoming stagnant. It helps maintain prostate health by allowing the gland to clear itself regularly. It supports restful sleep through the release of natural calming chemicals like serotonin and oxytocin. And it eases stress, softens anxiety, and lifts your mood when the weight of the day feels a little heavier than usual. These are not trivial benefits. These are the invisible threads that hold your well-being together as the years pass. But beyond the body, something even more powerful happens. Masturbation allows you to stay in touch with the part of yourself that still feels. The part that still carries longing, that still holds identity, that still wants to experience warmth and tenderness, even if only for a moment. And that part of you does not vanish with age. It may become quieter, yes, but it is still there, waiting to be acknowledged, waiting to be cared for. Thomas shared something with me that I've heard in different forms from so many men. After his wife passed, he stopped everything. For nearly 6 years, he hadn't allowed himself a single moment of physical pleasure. "I thought it wasn't appropriate anymore," he said. "I didn't think I was allowed to still be that kind of man." That sentence stayed with me long after he left, because in it, I heard the same quiet grief that lives in many older men's hearts. The belief that aging means shrinking, that desire must be buried, that dignity and sensuality cannot live in the same body after a certain age. But this belief is a myth, a cruel one, because when you silence that part of yourself, you also silence joy. You silence connection. You begin to feel invisible, even to yourself. The loneliness that comes from denying your own humanity runs deeper than most people realize. When Thomas began to gently reconnect with himself, without guilt, without rush, something shifted. He began to smile more. His energy changed. His sleep improved. He didn't feel like a young man again, and that wasn't the goal. What he felt was present, grounded, reclaimed. It wasn't about chasing youth. It was about honoring life, his life, right here, right now. And that is what masturbation can be in later years. Not an escape, but a return. A quiet, powerful way of reminding yourself that you still matter, that your needs are still valid, that your body, though different than before, is still worthy of care and kindness. So if you have ever doubted whether this part of your life has a place in your present, let me assure you that it does. Not because of science alone, but because of something deeper. Because pleasure is not about proving anything. It is about remembering that you are still here, still feeling, still whole. Now that you've heard all 5 secrets, there is one last truth I want to share. A message that ties everything together. A message that reaches beyond biology and touches something far more lasting. What you'll hear next is not just about the body, it's about how to walk through the years ahead with strength, confidence, and a quiet, unshakable respect for who you are. Stay with me. The most important part is coming. 5 powerful truths. If you've stayed with me until now, thank you. That alone speaks volumes about your strength and your willingness to grow, even in the quietest corners of life. These weren't just medical facts. They were reminders that your body still matters, that connection is still possible, that even now you deserve to feel alive. We talked about letting go of old myths, listening to your changing body, and seeing self-touch not as shameful, but as meaningful. We uncovered how silence and disuse can slowly disconnect you, and how awareness can bring you back. And perhaps most importantly, we reminded each other that desire doesn't disappear with age. It deepens. If one of these truths touched something inside you, take a moment and comment "still here." And if your heart says you're ready for more, feel free to subscribe. I'll be here sharing honest guidance made for men who still want to live fully. Your story isn't over, not even close. In the next video, we'll keep exploring what it means to age with dignity, connection, and quiet confidence.